Hello writers, welcome to the third part of this series where we are discussing self-publishing with Dave Henderson from my ebook. Hi writers, it's me again and we are back with Dave Henderson from my ebook to continue our discussion about self-publishing.
One of the other very proudly South African problems we have, and yeah, it does apply to a lot of other countries, is how do I get paid? And I've actually done a video on this pretty recently where so you go into Amazon, and as I mentioned, Amazon has its doors open for South African writers, and everything's going smoothly up until you get to the royalty collection. And you say, I'm from South Africa, and Amazon goes, great, we're going to try to post you a royalty check.
That's my favorite part, the check.
Can you imagine how many pissed off phone calls I get from authors going, nah, we're not going to do posted checks. So it is one of the most commonly asked questions about how do I get paid? The next question obviously being how much money will I make, but how to get paid from South Africa is now the first thing to know is that a lot of people know about PayPal, okay? Amazon won't touch PayPal with a 10-foot pole. The reason I can think about it is that PayPal is owned by eBay, and Amazon and eBay are not exactly BFFs. So what Amazon does support, firstly, if you're lucky enough to have a bank account held typically in the first world, that's awesome. I don't. But if you do, Amazon will typically accept that. So you can be a writer from South Africa who lives in South Africa, but your bank account can be housed in a different country. And so if you don't have access to a first world bank account, there is an online platform which takes care of that for you. So the way I collect royalties and the way I refer and recommend all my authors collect royalties is to use Payoneer. So it's Payoneer.com, hopefully for the website. And essentially that opens up, similar to PayPal, an offshore account that you pay for, it's in the range of like $30 per year or so, but it'll issue you a set of US account details that Amazon would accept. And so that's one of the cool ways as writers from Africa that we can kind of, leapfrog the barrier of collecting payments, because money is not just money. Money is validation. And so if you're writing and you're not getting paid, psychologically, you're not getting rewarded for the passion project. And so aside from reader reviews, that little bit of income trickling in is a great incentive, and it helps the writer get excited about obviously writing more. So Payoneer is an absolutely amazing way for writers from countries outside of the US and Europe to make sure that they can still get paid easily.
I haven't used it yet, but I see you can actually get a card. So you don't, because what happens with my PayPal at the moment, the money has to go into my F&B account, and then, you can only access from there, and that takes a while. But with Payoneer, you can actually get the card. So does that actually work in South Africa?
Okay, so the short answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Card will work. The reason I recommend, yeah, absolutely. So it's a very South Africanism again, where the card is going to get posted to you, and our post office is kind of not working.
Okay.
And so what will happen? We're going to hear that a few times, I think. So what happens is, and it happened to me, is you're going to apply for your account, and Payoneer's going to say, okay, a card's on its way. And I didn't get a couple of cards. I waited and I waited and I waited. And so the problem when an author waits is typically they go, oh no, the account's not working up until I get the card. And so an author needs to understand that a card's separate. You can apply for the account, you can receive money into the account, and even if your card, like mine, gets lost and never reaches you, that's okay. Because what you do is you collect money into the Payoneer account before eventually transferring it locally. The card, I have one, I don't use it. After I got a new copy sent to me, you could technically swipe it, you could technically draw from it, but as an author, realistically, with 1 or 2 books, the income is not enough that you're going to walk around in a shopping spree inside Sandton City.
Okay, well, you never know. Okay, no, cool stuff. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, no, but yeah, it's a nice platform, and it's very simple to use. Like PayPal is. I'm very familiar with PayPal, so Payoneer was new for me to learn. Okay, no, that's good. Okay. All right, question. Lots of spam or scams. Scams.
Scam.
Yeah.
So did you notice with lockdown happening, how much spam increased, by the way? Like the insane amounts of emails and offers and phone calls that have come through, and authors are no different. And I think, again, being from South Africa and being from Africa, we get targeted in a certain way, because what you'll get targeted by is you'll get targeted by fancy sounding salespeople. And I'm not going to say they speak down to you, but they speak really loudly, really fast, and throw a lot of fancy words at an author. And they give the author what they're craving. They give the author the validation, going, "Oh my God, we've seen a sample of your writing. It's amazing. You know, we want to publish you." And the author's getting showered with praise. "Oh, and by the way, to enter this competition, you just need to pay this fee. Or to get us to help you, there's an assessment fee." And so as writers from within Africa, you're at risk of being sucked into very well-shaped publishing scams. And I've written some really cool posts on the guilty parties, and they actually tend to all be related in some kind of weird incestuous family. And they're currently owned, I think, by a very well-known publishing house. And but essentially, the modus operandi is very similar. And I think as South Africans, we are kind of a little on edge when it comes to high pressure sales. And that's typically how it starts, is phone calls out the blue going, "You're amazing. We love you. Pay us some money." And a lot of people that I speak to have been scammed. A lot of people have found out the hard way that the requests for money won't stop, and the excuses for the money won't stop. And so,
and I just want to interrupt you. Like what happens, with what happens, like with some of my students, is they phone you and they tell you they have place now. A book was cancelled. They can put your book in now. So you have to do this transaction, transfer the money. We can get your book up and running and stuff. So there's a lot of like that time constraint, which they milk quite a bit. So that's just something.
And it's okay to be skeptical. In fact, you know, I think as South Africans, our default setting is probably skeptical, right? You know, so when someone calls and says something that you don't understand, and has a high pressure call to action going, "You need to answer now because this competition is going to be gone tomorrow. This offer, this package is not going to be on offer tomorrow. The spaces are limited." I would say be skeptical, because typically the best advice I can give you is to do your homework. So when someone says to you, "Hey, I'm from X, company X," Google the hell out of that company. And especially if you add keywords in like, you know, company X scam. And you're going to find out there are some really cool blogs out there that cover these scams very closely, especially where it's people from outside the country. And typically this is what happens, is African authors are targeted because we're kind of new to the self-publishing space. And as soon as anyone showers a bit of praise and puts a bit of pressure, we fold. You know, we fold easily. And so
I think that's any author. We love praise. It doesn't matter where you live.
Let your inner skeptic out. When someone calls you and showers praise, like, "Why are you showering me with praise? I've never heard of you before." And as soon as that phone call's done, Google them. And there are a whole bunch of author communities online, Facebook, for example, where you can pop a question, go, "Hi guys, I was approached by this company. What do you think?" Again, do your own homework so that you know, you don't have to rely on other people's opinions. But we are targeted as authors from South Africa. And unfortunately, because you're paying in dollars for a lot of these packages, it is a very expensive lesson to learn. It's terrible. And so the best advice I have for my authors is, and the way I like to help my authors is to say, "Listen, anything you do not understand, I will clarify for you. It should be explained in a way that you're involved in every single step of the process, because self-publishing is about control. And if someone's spewing, you know, sales jargon at you at a high speed to get you to sign up quickly, and you're not, you know, fully following, there's a problem, and that's a red flag, and you should take a step back."
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I've spoken to some students who they got quotes for their books, which, I mean, it was astronomical. And I don't think a bestseller in South Africa makes that kind of money, but that's what they were expected to spend. So be very careful with the money. Could you tell us a bit about the recommended steps and processes involved with the publishing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. I would love to. So every author, and this actually applies to both traditional and self-publishing, so every author needs to follow roughly the same steps. So if you are looking to get your book published, you might want ebook and paperback. There is actually a set process, like a timeline almost, in front of you, consisting of every step you need to go from draft manuscript to published on the bookshelves potentially. And being self-publishing, bear in mind that each one of these steps is a separate cost and separate timeline typically, where if you're going traditional, these steps might be a little more invisible to you, but just know that they are happening in the background. So being aware of them and kind of what they contain is super important to have a fun publishing process. So the very first step, obviously, is once the author is officially done. So the final draft from the author's side, typically in something like Microsoft Word, and that will be editing. So that will be the dreaded editing process where you find someone who can scour your words, trim them down, and tell you about your life's shortcomings. And once the edit is done, typically they're going to give your feedback in Microsoft Word again with track changes. If you were doing a more colorful book or a cookbook at this point, you might have some illustrations that you would want to do. So cookbooks, children's books typically get the very detailed illustrations. Once any potential illustrations are taken care of, you're going to move across to the cover process. So the cover design process is where your book gets packaged into something that looks beautiful and captivating. You might be getting just an ebook design, in which case a cover is a front cover, or you might be also after a print version, which means that it's a full wraparound cover. So front cover, spine, back cover. And bear in mind that the cover is obviously one of the first things that any reader is going to see. So it goes without saying, it's going to need a lot of love in order to attract those first-time readers to you. Once your cover design is taken care of, typically, as I mentioned, you're going to get a nice PDF, a print-ready PDF cover out that process. We move you across to the, it sounds horrible, move you across. You enter into the typesetting process, which is essentially where an author gets the print-ready file created. So what you have beforehand is just words, Microsoft Word, for example. What you have on the other side of typesetting is a beautiful, professional-looking PDF. So when you walk into a shop, like let's say there's a bookshop in the corner and you pick up a book and you can see this book is self-published. You can just see it's got the look and feel of a self-published book. Typically, there's one of two things, or potentially both, that the author's done wrong. And the first one is the cover, and the second is the typesetting, where the font and typography type layout of the book has been done poorly, or it smells like Microsoft Word. So anything that exits a typesetting process, you don't want the Arial or the Garamond or the typical Microsoft Word look and layout. The typesetter should be a lot smarter and help you to get something that you ideally can't differentiate. A fun test here is to go to any reader and say, okay, pick your top 3 books. And when you hear what they are, well, who published them? And the point is that you shouldn't really be able to differentiate between a well-written book if it's properly done. And that's the responsibility of a good typesetter. Once typesetting is done, if an author wanted an ebook, you would move on to create the ebook. So if you were just looking for a printed book that you might want to touch, hold, and get printed at a local printer, you can stop at that point. But ideally, you're going to get an ebook version put to Amazon, which means your next step is getting the ebook created. Once your ebook is ready, so it's like a file. It's almost like a Word document or a PDF document, but it's a .epub. And that's the file that most serious, major international retailers would accept. So don't think about ebooks as being PDF. They're not. PDFs do not reflow to different screen sizes, which means on your phone, they might look cuck. On a big screen, they're going to look a lot better. The other thing with PDFs is they're a little harder to monetize. If you go to Amazon, Amazon will let you upload a PDF, but they will more than likely butcher when they try format that PDF into a compatible ebook their side. So you never ever want to feed a PDF into Amazon. Again, always when you're chatting with your team who's helping you, separate PDF from ebook, because they are technically two different things. So from the ebook process, you're going to get an EPUB file. That EPUB file in the next step is then published online. So you've got now the ebook version, the digitized version of your book. And the next question is, well, where can I publish this? And that's typically where we take our authors to Amazon. And as we spoke about before, aside from Amazon, there's a bunch of other shops you might want to get your book into as well. So that's where the ebook then gets listed online for sale. And one of the final steps is potentially getting your paperback listed as well. So if you know ahead of time that your book wants to end up, or you want your book to end up on Amazon as a paperback and an ebook, you need to let your typesetter know, because Amazon's got a whole bunch of different hoops it wants you to jump through in terms of the spec of the file. So a very simple example is if you had a South African size of A5, Amazon does not know A5. That is not an Amazon or international trim size. So typically you would take an A5 and we would adapt it to an 8-inch by 5-inch, which is basically just a size that Amazon understands. That's a mil or two difference from an A5. And so the final step, publishing-wise, sees the author's ebook end up on Amazon and sees the author's paperback also potentially end up on Amazon. And so those are the basic foundation publishing steps. For a lot of authors going, well, I want to know about marketing. Bear in mind that you don't want to waste any money on marketing if those foundation steps have been done poorly. So when an author comes and says, okay, what marketing stuff can I do with this book? And if you've got a badly designed book, the advice I'm going to give you is, before you touch a cent on marketing, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's get your cover, for example, sorted out.
Okay, cool. What pre-publishing steps are crucial? Like we've spoken about budget before and there are costs involved and stuff like that, and not really wanting to cut corners, but just kind of what do you say is like the most crucial steps that you need in terms of pre-publishing?
So pre-publishing, would that be processes, for example, before editing starts, or are you talking about the kind of process I've just mentioned?
Let's do pre-editing, because I mean, we have spoken about editing. We spoke about it last time and the costs involved and the importance of editing and stuff. So what do you see in books that you would say are important? This one makes this one better versus that one because they've X, Y, and Z.
Okay, I'll take a bit of a different tact on this one. So I think the best pre-publishing advice, and again, I've taken off publisher cap and I've put on business cap, is to think of your book as a product. And so this might actually start before you've actually written, where you decide the exact genre that you want to write in, because again, certain genres are more competitive than other genres. The second thing is, if you're busy writing, how niche is your content? Because naturally, if you write something about a dusty South African, let's say it's historical fiction set in a dusty South African farm town, how many people might be interested in that book? And are there ways to take some content that might be very niche and adapt it so that it's actually made a little bit more relevant? So for example, if you've got a very South African book that's set in South Africa, uses a lot of South Africanisms and slang, you probably want to have, for example, a glossary at the end of the book going, hey guys, I use the word braaivleis. It's actually what, a barbecue or something. And so think about that kind of thing before you reach the publishing phase. So firstly, the genre and category you're writing in, is it competitive? And are there ways you can open up your book to more of an audience where it might be typically niche content? So a memoir or biography, for example. A lot of authors tend to make the mistake of vomiting. So you get the manuscript and it's me, my story, me, my life, me. How many people want to read that? Like how many people actually want to read a book where someone's vomited on you? It's kind of like being at that braai and the guy's sitting and he's just talking and you nod and you nod and you're gone. And a lot of people writing memoirs fall into that trap where they kind of tell one way, where the best-selling books that I've seen in that category tend to give a bit of a story, a bit of a narrative, and then extract lessons, extract steps, extract, whatever is important for the reader to see. It's not left up to the reader to try and figure that out. So whatever story you might want to tell, even if it's in a niche genre like biography, try extract the value into actionable steps, for example, so that someone reading it, it's made a bit more engaging than a purely boring one-way tale.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think in fiction we speak of that as the theme. So even if you have a local story, you still want to have a universal appeal or a international or a theme that is relatable to many people, even though they don't share that exact experience. That comes through so good. Let's quickly talk. We said we were going to talk about money. So can you, by any chance, give us just a ballpark idea of if I brought my book, standard fiction genre or a non-fiction book, what am I looking at in terms of spending?
I love this question because it's always my gut
It
answer
depends.
always, how long is a piece of string? Because
Okay.
you might get an author who knocks on your door and says, hey, I just want a cover design. This whole rest of the thing, I got it sorted, just a cover, in which case that's the cost. You might get an author, which is often the case, who knocks on your door and says, yeah, I'm clueless. I need help from beginning to end. I need everything. In which case, the more we help you, obviously the higher the quote. So yeah, the first question is always, how much help do you actually need? And this is where the onus goes onto the author to actually do a little bit of homework. Because often the author comes and says, well, I need all the help. You know, I'm totally clueless. I'm at the start. I need editing, cover, typesetting, ebook, Amazon, print on demand. And naturally, that's going to lend itself to a bigger quote. They then see the quote and they go, oh my goodness, it's terrible. No, you know, I'm not going to self-publish or whatever the case is. Worse yet is they're going to find someone like a freelancer, you know, the sort of the cheapest of the cheap of the cheap. And in certain cases, that'll obviously come back to bite you. So, so yeah, I think that in terms of budget, first do your homework as to the exact help you need. So again, out of all the steps I mentioned, decide those kind of help or those kind of steps you need ahead of time. A lot of that's determined by the format you want to see at the end. So one of the biggest sort of pivotal questions at the beginning of my conversations are, what formats are you going to see at the end of this? Do you want just an ebook, which is going to be quicker and cheaper? So if an author says, I'm in a hell of a rush, I also have quite a tight budget, then I'm going to say, well, how about just an ebook? Because ebook means your cover costs are trimmed. It also means your typesetting costs are minimized, because ebooks typically are not as pretty and fancy and detailed as the print versions. And so the process is a lot cheaper. And authors often, if you're on a tight deadline, again, ebooks are just the way to go. So assuming, for example, that you were just looking for the absolute minimum. Now, bear in mind that all the advice I'm going to give you is excluding editing, because editing tends to be crazy when it comes to pricing. So editing is generally a per word cost. Some editors I know give it per page and stuff like that, which is a little confusing. So generally the feedback you're going to get from an editor, or the quote you'll see from editing, is per word. South African guideline rate, Mia, correct me here, for proofreading and for editing is around 30 to 50 cents.
Yeah,
so this
it depends on the qualification of the editor. Okay, so that's a big thing to check out for before you pay for an editor, is to just check what their qualifications are and what they've done. And just like you research the company, you research the editor. Okay.
Check you out, man. You've been listening all along. So yeah, editing's a per word cost, and typically where books are a bit longer, if you have a 50,000 word book, for example, that cost of editing will be a bit scary. But looking now to the core services of cover, cover, ebook, maybe to Amazon, your costs are roughly going to be sub 10,000 Rand. So I'm not quite sure what in dollars that's going to be, but very easily to get your ebook created, your front cover designed, and your book then published, it's going to be, like I say, below 10,000 Rand. Obviously, the variable inside there is how detailed is your book. So typically we treat fiction and nonfiction a little differently, because fiction, I'm sure you'll agree, is most of the time just words. Nonfiction tends to be more detailed, where it's graphs and tables and pictures. And where it comes to ebook world, those sorts of elements need extra love and attention. So typically there is a split between nonfiction and fiction, where nonfiction is a little bit more detailed and a little bit higher price-wise. But yeah, that's a very ballpark figure that excludes the editing cost, as I mentioned, per word. And I think for paperbacks, the cost is also fairly similar for the average book. So I think if you said, actually, I don't care about this ebook thing, I just want paperback, I think also roughly sub 10K. Again, the most important factor in creating a paperback is typesetting. Typesetting depends on the level of detail of your book, where fiction is generally always a quicker and easier process. Nonfiction is going to take a little longer and cost a little more as well.
Okay, so hence the writer's piggy bank, right?
I hope that answered the question.
It did. Thank you very much. Okay. In the previous video, we spoke about Amazon and how to get paid by Amazon and stuff. So I was wondering, could we like do some math? Okay. And we also mentioned some other platforms as well. Yeah. So tell me, okay, so Amazon, what kind of splits are we looking at for a South African author? If my book costs $10 or whatever the average book is on Amazon, what does the split look like? How much money is roughly going to end up in my bank account?
I'm so glad you used the qualifier of as a South African author, because we tend to get shafted a bit as writers outside the first world. You tend to get shafted a bit. So we spoke about one of the obstacles earlier being how to get paid. So the fact that we have to jump through an extra hoop just to get some money from book sales. And when it comes to actual royalty calculations, it's not too dissimilar. So I'll tell you now, but needless to say that we are, again, a little on the back foot when it comes to the calculation Amazon uses to pay us royalties. So if you don't mind, Mia, can I use the example of your book as a calculation?
To use the example, yes.
So I actually had a quick look at your book before I spoke with you, and your book's being sold for $10 on Amazon. As I understand it, 10 or $9.99 thereabouts. So the first thing to understand for those readers who quickly looked up your book, which is called, it's called Writing the Crap Out of It, right?
Write the crap out of it, yes.
Write the crap out of it. So I had a quick look, and the list price people are going to see is not necessarily going to be exactly the $10 because every country will list its own applicable sales tax. So the $10 we listed at is actually reflecting at about $11.49 or so. And the reason is because that's the $9.99 or $10 plus 15% VAT. So that's the first thing people, you might not see the exact price of $10. Now, Amazon talks in two ways when it comes to royalty. Amazon will either talk about a 35% royalty or a 70% royalty rate. Now, what decides if an author is going to get the 35% or the 70%? Firstly, you can actually choose. So there is actually a checkbox going, I want 35%, I want 70%. One of the biggest factors you need to consider before choosing is what list price you're going to list the book at. So if you list above $10 or below $3, you are consigning yourself to only earn 35%. Where if you select anything between 3 and 10, you're allowed to then select 70%. So if we take your book as an example, where it's listed at $10 or just under, you would earn up to 70%. Now, I use the word up to deliberately because here's where being a writer from South Africa is not the best thing, where depending where the reader who buys your book lives, you will either earn 70 or 35. So for example, your book's being sold at $10, 2 readers buy the book, one lives in the third world, Africa, South Africa, one lives in the first world, US, for example. Now, I use the word first world and third world quite loosely, but essentially there's a list of countries.
We need better words for that. We don't like those words.
Trying to think what other words we can use.
Say South Africa and America.
Okay, so I'll use the word South Africa, and it absolutely applies to a lot of other countries, for example, in South America and Africa and things like that. Now, one reader buys it from South Africa and one reader buys it from America. You've selected 70% and you've priced it at the sort of $10 and below. The reader from America will earn you 70%. So your pay will look something like $7 out of the $10 list price. The reader from South Africa will only earn you 35%. Now, I would love to know why, but till this day, I have no reason. But any reader who buys your book, regardless that you've obeyed the price and you've selected 70%, you'll only earn 35% for a lot of countries that typically fall inside Africa, South America, and things like that, where the readers from, the Americas, the Europes and things like that will earn you the 70% if that's what you've selected. The good news, which may sound strange, is actually a lot of your readers are in America and are in Europe and are in the UK. Because although South Africa and Africa as a whole can access News Amazon, a lot of people don't know about it yet. So it's still catching up. We're still catching up to that, meaning although you will have readers in this country, A lot of your readers, like fiction, for example, tend to be in countries like America where you will earn the higher royalty rate. So again, if you're selling at $10, you're going to earn 70% if the reader lives in America, or 35% if the reader was, potentially South African. And there are one or two caveats. So there are one or two asterisks where if you select 70%, Amazon all of a sudden cares about how big your file size is. So this affects authors who have detailed interiors, for example, a lot of pictures or a very big book, where let's say your book compressed on Amazon was 5 megabytes. Amazon, if you've selected the 70% option, will actually deduct 15 US cents per megabyte of file size. Meaning, when you get your ebook created, you better make sure the ebook team optimizes your book, because otherwise you're going to be losing money before it's actually earned. So you can see that being from South Africa, we have to deal with a lot of these kind of things where you're going to earn 35%, where someone else from America would be earning 70% for the same sale. Things like not being able to easily get paid without the help of something like Payoneer. There's a whole bunch of other things authors from South Africa and Africa go through.
I hope you learned a lot. I have included contact details in the titles of these posts. If you have any questions for myself or for Dave, do not hesitate to ask.